This week on the Powell Not Found podcast, we're talking about Aaron Judge hitting 300 home runs, Jazz Chisholm being placed on the DL, and a little deep dive into Ralph Kiner, the name you've been hearing about ever since Judge hit 300 home runs. Here we go. Let's hit it.
I'm gonna tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast. Did she knew her birthday was getting corona?
A 3-0. Hammered in the air, deep to left field. History, number 300 for Aaron Judge.
And there it is.
The fastest man ever in Major League Baseball to reach the 300 home run plateau.
Quite an amazing feat. If you weren't watching it, Aaron Judge hits his 300th home run with the Yankees, cementing himself as a pretty damn good player. And cementing himself as the fastest Major League Baseball player to get to 300 home runs. Did it against the Chicago White Sox in the last game of the series. You can see right there if you're watching the video version of the podcast, which you can find on YouTube at Powell Not Found, and also go ahead and find us on Apple Podcasts. Just search Powell Not Found. The reviews kind of help. Aaron Judge doing this in historic fashion, 995 games it took him to get to 300. And if you're a Yankees fan and you're used to watching Aaron Judge, you're kind of like, man, I feel like this should have probably come a little bit sooner, right? Than it did, especially if you have 62 in a season. But he kind of smashed the record when they put up the actual stat for how many games that he did this in. It's kind of amazing. 995 games for Aaron Judge. And you also have to kind of consider, too, that he did it within 9 years of his debut season in 2017, whatever is considered his rookie season. And he kind of smashed the record. The record was previously held by Ralph Kiner, who played in the 40s and the 50s for the Pittsburgh Pirates and had some stints with the Cubs and Cleveland at the very, very end of his playing career. And he had 1,087 games was the previous record. Now, Ralph Kiner had an amazing run. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we kind of dive into his stats, because when I started diving into his stats, because I was like, you don't hear that name very often mentioned anymore. I mean, there are certain names in baseball that just keep on going. Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, Ted Williams, Pete Rose, Ty Cobb, these legendary older players. Pete Rose, not of that ilk, not of that era, but you keep hearing about these names that kind of keep on going throughout history. Ralph Kiner, not one of them. And when you kind of dive into the stats, you start realizing why that might be. But then you start realizing how involved he was in the game and how memorable he was, but not for the current era. And he might be just one of those guys that, like, if you ask your parents, you probably found out about Ralph Kiner. Right on his tail, Ryan Howard with 1,093 games, Juan Gonzalez with 1,096. Alex Rodriguez, which is a name that I was surprised to see so far down, with 1,117. He kind of came into the league by storm, too. I mean, he was supposed to break the home run record and stuff like that. Got very, very close with 696. And then Giancarlo Stanton with 1,119 games. And this was the name that really struck me and kind of struck a chord with me as I was thinking about the weight of this record, what this record means, right? It's interesting that Aaron Judge smashes this record, but it's no indication that he's going to continue to hit 300 more or 462 more to kind of test Bond's record, right? because if Giancarlo Stanton's any kind of measure of success, is that the front half of your career and the back half of your career can be completely different. And it can take a turn for the worse, and especially at Aaron Judge at 32 years old. One would argue that probably the first 9 and the back 9 are not going to be the same, right? They're not going to have the same kind of frantic pace. Now, maybe he'll completely disprove that, Barry Bonds certainly seemed to get better with age. He was like a barreled wine. He was the bottle that the winery brings you and says, this might be a 1925 rosé, but it tastes as if it was made yesterday. It's gotten better with time. I mean, Barry Bonds at the age of like 42 still looked like he could sock 73 home runs. It was pretty It's amazing what alleged steroid use can do. But Aaron Judge getting to 300 home runs is quite an accomplishment in 995 games. You got to remember that Aaron Judge came up as kind of an older player. Aaron Judge came up as a player that everyone kind of doubted that would actually be able to sustain. And in some regards, Aaron Judge played into that, played into it a little bit because he was a little bit kind of hobbled and hurt in the beginning of his career. He was laying out for balls and getting out for extended periods of time. And the first couple years of his career were kind of mired by that, right? He was still putting up tremendous numbers, but he still was getting hurt. It was kind of either him or Giancarlo Stanton were out. And Giancarlo Stanton has continued to prove that he's made out of glass, but Aaron Judge in the beginning was very much like that in the 2018, 2019 kind of seasons where you have a great rookie season, but then couldn't just stay on the ball field, right? There were concerns this year about how pliable, right, if I'm going to use that term from Tom Brady, how pliable Aaron Judge is going to be, basically, and while he's going through the center field rigor as opposed to playing right field for most of his career. He seemed to have disproved that with a couple healthy seasons in a row. Also mentioned earlier in the show, Aaron Judge has a 2020 season, which was a cut short season, right? And still got to this plateau faster than anybody else. I mean, he's missing not only the games that he missed due to injury, but he's also and age, right? Because coming up at 24, the Yankees kind of who knows if he was underdeveloped, who knows if an injury setback was happening earlier in his career, but he didn't get that those early years, right? That some players do, like an Alex Rodriguez who comes up at 19, like a Derek Jeter who comes up at 19, 20 or whatever he was. Aaron Judge is missing those years. So it makes this accomplishment even more special. I mean, it makes it more impressive to think that Aaron Judge had a lot of things stacked against him, not only due to his physically and just organizationally. They weren't willing to kind of bring him up in at a younger age, right, where he may be able to do some more career damage. I mean, could you imagine having a team if Aaron Judge came up a couple years earlier in 2015 or 2014 with Derek Jeter on the team, or with an older retiring Derek Jeter, or with an Alex Rodriguez on the team even in 2015? Because I think Aaron Judge may have gotten a little bit of tail end Alex, but in 2016, but it was kind of hard to tell in those last couple seasons. Would have been kind of amazing. But so this feat is really, really cool. Aaron Judge accomplishes the 300th home run at 32 years of age. Ralph Kiner did it at 30. And Aaron Judge doesn't seem to show any signs of slowing down. It's quite amazing. So the way this happened was kind of a nice way to kind of end the Chicago White Sox series if you're a Yankees fan. The Yankees kind of got shellacked by the White Sox. They came into Chicago wanting to take all 3 games because that's what you do against a team that has less than 30 wins in August. Chicago has mixed up their manager at this point with Grady Sizemore. They've completely committed to the tank season this year. They're not a serious baseball team, and they came into this Yankees series with 28 wins. And the Yankees have been playing better as of late. The schedule gets a little bit easier, but these series always tend to worry me a little bit because the Yankees, especially after you're going into the break and then after the break, they didn't look like a playoff team, and they've started to kind of play a little bit better. Judge and Soto have started to hit a little bit more. The rest of the lineup, Austin Wells, has started to kind of increase and started to be a formidable part of that lineup. But whenever the Yankees face a really easy team, and by easy team I mean a sub 500 team, it appears sometimes that they take the pedal off the gas a little bit. Now, this could be completely true. Eric Kratz on Foul Territory combated the idea that baseball players stop trying the other day on one of their shows that they were talking about this. But it does seem like they don't go into these series with a as big of a game plan as maybe they should go into the series, and then they tend to get their butts kicked in the beginning, and that kind of starts off this kind of media snowball of what are the Yankees doing. And of course, they came into Chicago, they came into Kaminsky or to U.S. Cellular Field, and got their butts kicked, 12-2. Heel looked terrible. He just kept on laying some fastballs down the plate, and he got shellacked. The Chicago Cubs, for the first time this season, had a double-digit win, and the Yankees looked pretty bad. And when you're about to lose a series, then the next day to not only a sub 500 team, but just a team that barely has 30 wins, you start to kind of question whether this is a playoff team at all. The second game goes by and Juan Soto hits 3 home runs in that game. It kind of erases the mire of the previous game. Also, the offense still not hitting, which is problematic because if Juan Soto doesn't go off, maybe that game goes a different way. Maybe we lose the series. Maybe this becomes a little bit of another worst loss of the season kind of thing, another gut punch, if I'm going to use a term from Aaron Boone. But Juan Soto goes off. He ends up hitting 4 home runs and 4 at-bats, technically, over the course of 2 games. He gets 3 home runs and a walk, and then the next game he hits a home run here, so technically 4 consecutive at-bats. Acting a little bit like Reggie Jackson over 2 games, though. So it's a little bit different. And the Yankees kind of even the series up and then kind of really take it to the Chicago White Sox in a large way. I mean, winning this game 10-2. Some really, really good plays in the series by Oswaldo Cabrera. I still don't understand why they're not playing him every single day. He seems like he lights a spark. They seem to have forgotten that when Oswaldo Cabrera came up, a couple years ago, he robbed a home run, flexed in the outfield. He was bringing that young energy to the team, and he's just used as a bench piece. And whenever he does big hustle plays, I feel like he's rewarded by a benching. It's well, why try at that point? The hustle play I'm talking about is Alex Verdugo hits a ball to center field. The outfielders end up colliding, but they make the play, and Oswaldo Cabrera ties the game up with a hustle sacrifice fly from second base, exactly like the kind of thing you want to see from every member of this team, right? Pay attention, Glaber, and ties the game up and gives energy back to the Yankees, and they end up going to win the series ultimately on more hustle plays like that. It was just Jazz Chisholm ends up getting hurt in this series by kind of a similar hustle play, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. But it sets up the scene, I guess, at the end when the Yankees are clearly going to take this series. They're up 4 runs, and Aaron Judge comes up to the plate and socks his 300th home run, which they've been waiting for quite some time. They've been setting this up in the broadcast and waiting for it to happen. and he does it here after they intentionally walk Juan Soto. Now, there's been a lot of talk about why would Grady Sizemore walk Juan Soto when, clearly to get to Judge, this is insulting. Maybe Judge was disrespected. All this kind of talk, and I'm sure he was. I mean, I guess that is when you're a baseball player, if you're intentionally walked and viewed as the lower level hitter, you are going to take offense to that. But that said, I mean, Juan Soto had hit 4 home runs over 2 games against you. At that point, it's a toss-up. Like, are you gonna have a piece of chicken or a piece of turkey, right? It's the same. It's clearly kind of the same thing. They're still great hitters, both of them. Which one are you gonna take your chances with? Well, technically, according to the stats, Aaron Judge was not having the series that Juan Soto was having. So I totally understand the move, right? Also, it sets up a double play, right? There is a chance, there is a universe where Aaron Judge hits a ball into the ground and all of a sudden they're out of it. It's still a game. But instead, what you get is a home run that is his 300th home run. And it was kind of a nice way to cap off the series. It was, again, like I said in the beginning of the show, it was a nice way to go into the off day as the Yankees prepare to face Detroit. And kind of set up this 38-game run to about 5-7 weeks, 8 weeks to take it to the Orioles and figure out who wins the division. Because right now the Orioles are matching win by win, and these two teams are locked on the top of the division at 72 and 50. It's funny watching this home run. And I thought this too, just to kind of segue a little bit into Ralph Kiner and all that kind of stuff, and the evolution of everything here as we watch a little bit of this at bat. It's funny to me how different Aaron Judge's swing looks from the first time he came up to this one, right? And if you watched any player over, and there it goes, the 300th home run. If you watch any player over the course of their career, their numbers are going to be, their stance is going to be completely different. And Aaron Judge, in the very, very beginning of the year, there was all this talk about whether he was injured, whether his toe injury from the year before was going to really cause him to be a different player. Clearly not. He's arguably having a better season this year than he was in 2022 when he broke the record. But I do have here, let me fade back out here. I do have a picture of his first a video of his first career home run, and it was against Tampa Bay. It was August 13th, 2016, was Aaron Judge's first home run. And I'm just going to freeze frame it here if you're watching the video version of the podcast. Looks like a different player, right? I mean, camera angles, a little bit different and stuff like that. Batting stance is a little bit different. The bat's a little bit lower. A little bit like more of an open stance than I guess he has now and stuff like that. He definitely looks less jacked. This is also pre him fixing his teeth, so this is pure gap Judge, because he fixed that little gap in between his teeth in the 3 or 4 seasons in, and it just looks like a little bit of a different player. Let's take a look at the video here, and I'll play a little bit of the sound from Michael Kay. This is right after Tyler Austin, who's also on the team, hit his first career home run. So 2 players did that in a row. That's why they end up freaking out in the broadcast. But let's go ahead and listen to that first career home run so we get a little bit of a comparison here.
Jones hits one to center field and deep. Going back, Kiermaier, turning, looking, see ya! A monster home run! Back-to-back home runs by the Baby Bombers in their first big league at-bats. Can you believe it?
It's funny, Michael, you said what Judge has to do the same thing, and it's not that easy to walk up back-to-back. I mean, how many times did that ever happen in the history of baseball? 2 first at-bats, back-to-back home runs.
Really cool. Very, very different looking Judge. Very different looking stance. Very different looking everything. It just goes to show you that, this game is a game of adjustments. And over the course of 9 years, there's going to be a lot of adjustments. He's going to look like a different player. He's going to feel like a different person, right? Different confidence, everything. Everything's going to change in his game, right, from 9 years. A lot of the talk, too, has also been about like whether he can actually get to Bonds. Bonds finished his career at 762. Also, Bonds was kind of a little bit blackballed by baseball by the end of all this stuff that kind of happened. So there was a lot of the Giants, when he finally finished his contract back in 2007, Bonds could have still played. Bonds, if you ever really want to have, I've got Bonds' stats up here. Let me push here. Bonds played 22 years in the bigs from 1986 to 2007, and he came up at 21 years old. And this is what I'm driving back at that point of whether the age kind of plays against Judge in this case, right? The Yankees kind of have a tendency to kind of overdevelop their players a little bit, leave them in the minors a lot longer. That, along with MLB's just rampant service manipulation kind of thing happening, it's more likely to see a player now, I feel like, debut at late, 22, 23 as opposed to 19, 18, 19. I think they're drafting a lot of players out of college, which is going to put them at 22, as opposed to drafting out of high school. So you're not going to have a lot of younger players like you used to in the past. So 24 years old for Judge. Bonds comes up at 21 with Pittsburgh and then goes obviously to the Giants in 1983. When Bonds finishes his career, has 28 home runs that year. He plays in 126 games, 66 RBIs, 132 walks. His batting average is 276. His on-base percentage is 480. His slugging 565. He's a 1.45 OPS. Now in today's game, he would be considered the greatest hitter. He would be Judge, right? In his last year at 42 years old. Now, steroids aside, all those allegations aside, this is amazing. Playing 126 games, he leads the league in walks. And he has many consecutive years of just constant home runs. I mean, essentially from 1990 to 2004, from age 25 to 39, he averages like around 40 home runs a season. I mean, it's a unbelievable streak. So does Judge have a chance to with his age being at 24 years old, with a shortened season in 2020, with some injuries that plagued him, does he have a chance to get to Bonds? Sure, he has a chance, but man, it would take a remarkably consistent streak of home runs to get there. I mean, by the age of 39, I think 2005, it looked like Bonds was injured, and so he has that shortened season. He has an injury-plagued season, but then comes back and hits 26 and 28 home runs. But just listen to the streak of home runs that Bonds has from age 20, from 25 to 2004. He hits 33 dingers, 25 home runs, 34, 46, leads the league in San Francisco in 1993. 37 home runs, 33, 42, 40, 37, 34, 49 in 2000, 73 in 2001, 46, 45, 45, and that concludes it. And then he gets injured in 2005 and doesn't play. I mean, if Bonds kept going, say if Bonds was a machine, wanted to play until he was 50, right? I mean, the man would have 800 home runs. So does Judge have a chance to catch him? Sure. Judge has got to remain remarkably healthy because at age 32, say he has 10 years left, right? You're talking about an average of 46 home runs each year to kind of get to Bonds. That's going to be an uphill battle. But if anyone can do it, it's going to be Aaron Judge. And if anyone else can try to contend for that title, it's going to be the batter hitting right in front of him, Juan Soto. So it's just kind of remarkable. One of these names, too, that was kind of coming up was Ralph Kiner, right? Ralph Kiner was previously the record holder here for the home run chase for the fastest to get to 300 home runs at 1,087 games. He did it at age 30. Now, I had no idea about Ralph Kiner. He was an integral part of the Mets broadcasting booth for a long time, for 50 years. He was also a player with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he was also a player with Cleveland and the Cubs. And his career was kind of cut short, right? The same kind of parameters around Aaron Judge's career that we were talking about here, where it's like he comes up late, as a late bloomer at 24 years old. He has some injuries that plague him early in his career. Kind of happened to Ralph Kiner. Ralph Kiner debuts in 1946, and let me get his stats up here. Ralph Kiner debuts with the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1946. And he plays for 10 years in the bigs. So according to his Hall of Fame page, Ralph Kiner's career probably got prematurely delayed due to the war, the World War II that was going on. And so a lot of players of that era, including probably the most famous one is Ted Williams, their numbers probably would have been incredibly higher than they would have been had they not been interrupted by service to their country. So he is one of those players. He is a World War II veteran. He is and gets delayed because of that. So kind of a late bloomer, comes up at 23 years old himself, very, very close to Judge, and plays 8 years with the Pirates, 2 years with the Cubs, and 1 year with Cleveland. And the remarkable thing is that the amount of home runs consistently gets him to this 300 feet. The interesting thing about him is that he leads the league in home runs for 7 straight years when he comes up, right? This is how he gets to 300. And then his career, when you look at his baseball reference page, which I have him right up here, and this is what caused me to kind of research him a little bit, is his career, 10 years. You're like, well, what happened? How come we don't see him in the home run leaderboards? How come in 1998 we didn't hear a lot of stuff about McGuire passes Kiner and all this kind of stuff? He finishes out his career with 369 home runs. Career cut short because of back problems, which is kind of unfortunate because he was 32 years old, the age where Aaron Judge is right now. He finishes up with 369 home runs, so still ahead of that Judgian pace with one more year. And so he plays... I looked it up, and according to this SI article, he led the league for 7 straight seasons, all with the Pirates, and basically hit a home run once out of every 14.1 at bat. So a very, very consistent hitter, Ralph Kiner was. And so one of the things when I started digging a little bit deeper, this SI article basically said, quote, for 7 straight seasons, his first 7 in the majors, all with the Pirates, Kiner led his league in home runs. No one else, not Babe Ruth, not Barry Bonds, has ever done that. Kiner hit the ball out of the park once every 14.1 at-bats, the 6th best ratio ever. Moonshots mostly, and then also as an aside here, Vin Scully in an interview talking about Ralph Kiner also kind of reiterates that he hits these moonshots. He hits these balls higher than he's ever seen anybody hit a home run. And so after he hit 54 home runs, this is back to the quote, in 1949, no National Leaguer matched that number until the steroid era, which really began with, a little bit with Canseco and McGuire and all that kind of stuff. Unbelievable. His stats are crazy. 1946, Ralph Kiner hits 23 home runs, followed by 51, 40, 54, 47, 42, 37, 35 total, followed up by 28, 22, and he leaves the league in 1955 because of those back problems, hitting 18 home runs, 54 RBIs, a 243 average, and an 818 OPS, which would, again, be considered bad in that era, also considered excellent in this era. He'd still be probably one of the best hitters on the Yankees right now in his back-ridden season in 1955. So that's kind of the if he had continued playing, this would be a household name. They were saying in a lot of those videos that I was looking online that Ralph Kiner played 10 years, which is the minimum, and he got voted into the Hall of Fame in his 15th year of eligibility. So you don't hear a lot about him, even though he probably, if he had continued playing, he probably would be a household name at this point, and he'd probably be a player you'd know like a Griffey, like a Babe Ruth, like a DiMaggio and stuff like that. He would be one of those players. But unfortunately, career cut short in the beginning and career cut short at the end. When I looked up his Baseball Hall of Fame page, I wanted to kind of point out a couple different things. He said, the Hall of Fame says, quote, Kiner made his major league debut in 1946 at age 23, having lost 3 prime years to service to his country in World War II. He wasted no time making his presence felt as he led the National League in home runs and established a new franchise record in the process. Kiner jokingly recalled, and this is later on in the article, they talk about his broadcasting experience, where I guess he 1962, after he 7 years after he retired, the Mets came into the league, and the Mets were terrible at first, right? And for the first 5 years, were a dreary team. There's actually a great 30 for 30 on the Mets in the beginning that kind of talk about. I think it's Darryl and Doc, right? Is it Darryl and Doc? Or it's I don't know. I'll get back to you. I'll drop it in the description or something like that. But there's a very, very good Mets documentary that ESPN does about these first kind of years of the Mets, and the Mets were terrible. And so Kiner apparently joked, and he's quoted in this Baseball Hall of Fame article as, quote, the Mets hired me because they looked at my background with the Pirates and saw that I had losing experience, which is a cutting quote from Kiner. But if you look at the records of his Pirates team, and this is from 1946 to 1953, the Pirates were a glowingly bad team, which was they started off in 1946. They were 63 and 91. 47 was 62 and 92, followed by 83 and 71. So you feel like you're getting a little bit better. 71 and 83, you're hovering around 500 there. 57 and 96 in 1950. 64 and 90 in 1951. And then in 1952, it was not a good time to be in Pittsburgh as a baseball fan. 42 and 112, a 273 winning percentage. And right now, if you look at the standings, let me get the standings up. The Chicago White Sox have a 238 winning percentage right now. Worse than the 1952 Pirates. And that's saying something about how bad it's going in Chicago, because that's a pretty bad record. It's got to be one of the worst records in baseball. And then 1953, things got slightly better with 8 more wins at 50 and 104. So Kiner was not on some good teams. It was I think he was very, very used to being in some tough teams joining the Mets. So, and things didn't really get better for him until about 5 or 6 years later. So, especially with the Mets. So, anyway, so that was kind of an interesting little deep dive into Ralph Kiner that I didn't know. I do feel like there is a gigantic black hole in my knowledge about baseball when it comes to older players and how good they were. And a lot of the debate that's surrounding great players of the past is now marred by like, well, they wouldn't be able to kind of shake it in today's baseball environment because the pitching is so good, the pitching is so fast. I mean, that might be true, but it still doesn't take away from their accomplishments and their stats. I mean, their stats are the stats. It's the same game. It's just a little bit faster paced and a little bit harder throwing and stuff like that. So it just makes the accomplishments when you can get to some of these numbers like Aaron Judge did, it makes it even more impressive because the game is just so refined than it was in the past. But you can't blame those players, the errors against them. That's the era in which they were playing, right? So they only had each other to kind of compare against. And, that's the kind of way you have to kind of look at it. But so it was kind of fascinating. I love doing that little deep dive into Ralph Kiner. I actually have a little bit of a video here of Ralph Kiner. If you're looking at the video version of the podcast, which you can find at YouTube at powellnotfound.com, this is a little bit of Ralph Kiner's moonshot-esque swing
in a relatively brief 10 years.
Boom. There you go. A little bit of a Ralph Kiner imagery for you that I forgot to kind of push up there. And so very, very different. Very hard to kind of tell the level of the swing and from those kind of angles of that they were capturing the baseball games from. I can't imagine watching a baseball game like this. Although now, the one nice thing about watching these old clips in baseball, barely any ads on the screen. It's a lot cleaner of a look. You're definitely focusing in on the player as opposed to focusing on the score bug and the other 500 things on the screen. But anyways, that's going to do it for Ralph Kiner here. Just a couple more housekeeping items here before we end up going. In this series against the White Sox, Jazz Chisholm ends up getting hurt, sliding into home plate from a Volpe single, I want to say. It was like an infield single that he ended up trying to be a little bit aggressive, which is... It's a UCL injury, which I imagine the Yankees are going to take very, very, very seriously, and they're going to slow work him back just to be absolutely careful. The Yankees trade deadline is not working out that well. The Yankees ended up getting Mark Leiter Jr. from the Cubs, Enyel De Los Santos from the Padres, and also Jazz Chisholm from the Marlins. Jazz is now hurt. Enyel De Los Santos is now designated for assignment. I honestly don't understand that trade. Why would you give up the prospect capital if you're just going to use them in losing low leverage situations and just drop him like a fly? I mean, you'd think you'd at least keep his spot on the roster. I get he eats innings and doesn't have to use your valuable bullpen arms, but man, that really just sends a message to those pitchers. And when Enyel came in the first game of the series, I mean, it was a losing effort. It just seemed like he didn't care. And you couldn't blame him because I feel like they sent a message of like, you're either a valued part of this bullpen or you're just there to eat innings. And by designating him for assignment, what was the point of the trade, right? Surely there's other people in the bullpen that you can kind of burn in those situations. But was it worth burning those prospects? like just bring up a prospect and do that to them as opposed to just trading for someone and then just dropping them. So with this injury, really the only thing that they did at the trade deadline is Mark Leiter Jr., who was pretty on top of it, but then it's kind of struggled as of late. So again, it's not looking that great for the transactions. I know the market was slim, but the transactions have not exactly panned out. And if Jazz doesn't come back after this 10-day stint on the IL, then you're looking at basically the same team the Yankees were before the trade deadline, as when the season started. So you better hope that Judge and Soto keep on performing and the rest of the lineup picks up, because there might not be that much... there might not be a difference maker on this team unless they do, right? So anyways, Jazz is injured, so that kind of stinks. He brought a lot of energy to the team. I liked seeing him in the lineup. It was a little bit different. I do like the opportunity that this gives to Ben Rice and DJ LeMahieu and Oswaldo Cabrera, who we mentioned earlier in the show. who should get an opportunity. He seems like he is just chomping at the bit to get a starting opportunity. So it's good in that regard, but hopefully he kind of comes back because his bat, his energy, and his edge, I think, make this team feel a little bit different going into the last home stretch of the season. The other little piece of housekeeping is that this Detroit series will mark the return of Jose Trevino. And there's a little bit of debate about who's going to be catching, whether it's going to continue to be Austin Wells, because Austin Wells has been remarkable at the plate as of late. But Jose Trevino is the stalwart who's been with the team for quite some time, since acquiring him from Texas. And the Yankees have always platooned the catcher position. It's always been a two-man stint, right? Whether it was Higashioka and Sanchez, whether it was Higashioka and Trevino, whether it was the three-man platoon when they had Rortvet for all of last season. And so you'd expect that it's not going to change. Boone has already kind of said that Austin Wells is going to get that opportunity. He's going to get that opportunity until he continues not to hit, until he doesn't hit, because I don't think that you can just leave Trevino on the bench. So I don't think this is really that big of an issue as a lot of people think. I don't think Austin Wells has all of a sudden blown everybody out of the water and says, oh, he wants to be the starting job. But I do think that he's appealing being in a Yankees uniform because he's another left-handed bat that breaks up the lineup. And he is showing signs of being a consistent protection for Aaron Judge, which is something that has been very much missing with the decline of Glaber's offense and the decline of Verdugo's offense. And Jazz Chisholm being out now, there is not, and Giancarlo being out for an extended period of time, now just coming back and warming him up. He provided that protection that Judge needed in the lineup in order to see strikes, because before that, and you're still seeing a little bit of it, it was an intentional walk parade for Aaron Judge, which is not fun to see as a Yankees fan and hopefully does not continue. But with that said, we have 38 games to go. The Orioles are a good team. We only have 3 left against the Orioles. I'm hoping that the Yankees can kind of put some cushion in between them before that Orioles series, because otherwise it might be some angry podcast coming in September. So we'll see. The Yankees have a pretty easy schedule for August, so hopefully they can make that kind of padding happen. But for now, let's enjoy the moment. Let's enjoy Aaron Judge getting to 300 home runs. Congratulations, Aaron, becoming the fastest player and beating Ralph Kiner. Ralph Kiner's finally been toppled off that mantle. And we'll see you next week with more movies, with more baseball games. Subscribe to the podcast. I'm going to get a different mic for next week because this one's clearly dying after about 5, 6, 7 years of use. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of fix that little issue. But for now, this has been the Powell Not Found podcast. Go find us on Apple Podcasts. Go find us on YouTube. Have a good weekend, guys. And I will see you later. Bye, everybody.
Easter birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast. Did she knew her birthday was getting close?